Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee. It's April 15th, 2021. Welcome, everybody. And first item of business is whether we have any public comment. Kathy, is there anybody who wished to address the committee?
No, Rich, there's not.
Okay. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none? All right. Minutes approval. Could I get a motion for the minutes of March 18th and March 23rd? Glenn moves, Shauna seconds. Any questions or comments about either set of minutes? All right, are we ready to vote? I will call in order. Shauna?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So there, we've gotten through 4 items on the agenda in record time, I think. It's going to be a really quick meeting, I anticipate. Let's go to the chair's report. And I do have something I'd like to just talk about in general and solicit some discussion on, which is the report that I forwarded to everybody from the City of Ithaca Police Department on their year-end 2020 crime report. And I thought it was an interesting report in that it seems to show a pretty dramatic shift in statistics from 2020 compared to the years before. Certainly, it looks like there's been a rise in certain kinds of crime, particularly some of the more troubling violent crimes, and that there's been a significant reduction in arrests. I understand this was published in the Ithaca Voice, but I had missed it when it first came out. And I'm surprised it didn't get more attention in the press because it really does show some significant change if these statistics are accurate. I worry about the accuracy because certainly trying to classify these different crimes into specific boxes, there's some nuance there. And I understand that, but the overall trend seems to be fairly clear. And it seems also to be somewhat different from what's happening in the county generally. And Jen, thank you for sharing the data from the county side. I don't know if everybody's seen that information this afternoon, but I'd like to just solicit any thoughts on what might be going on here.
Rich, could I jump in here? It's Lance.
Yes.
Just a couple of things, because I looked at the city numbers and I looked at our numbers in a couple of things here. I think just to evaluate these numbers and what they mean. Historically, 2019, 2020, Ithaca City Court's been at a low number of cases. It's been a sharp downward trend. The same for assigned counsel. In looking at these numbers, overall you see crime in Ithaca is still down overall. And you notice, for instance, even these IPD numbers show a decrease in felony arrests, misdemeanor arrests, violation arrests. There are some increases in certain types of crime, robberies, assaults, a couple things to keep in mind there. I think that's a nationwide trend that's been reported that may be more related to the pandemic. You've seen kind of burps in that. The other thing to keep in mind here in terms of when you look at these IPD numbers, I'm not certain on this, but you're looking at, for instance, I can tell you in 2019, we had 392 total cases in Ithaca City Court. And if you compare that to their arrests, what I think IPD is showing, because we have different sets of statistics, they show 114 felony arrests, 606 misdemeanor arrests, 426 violation arrest, what I think that means is if someone's charged with a felony and some misdemeanors, and let's say a violation, for us, that's one case. I think they're reporting to DCJS each of those separately. So it makes it seem like there's a lot more crime going on there. You know, you have someone charged with 4 or 5 offenses in an act, which is not good, but it can make it seem like there's more cases there. Same with their numbers. I don't know for certain, but it seems to be they're reporting, that may be calls they're getting in terms of robberies or so forth. And some of these, if you look carefully at the historical numbers, you see some dramatic increases from 2019 to 20. A number of these you're seeing if you compare them going back 4 or 5 years, they're kind of reverting back in 2020 to a historical norm or closer to a historical norm, so that we saw an increase in 18 and 19 in crime on some of these, like robberies, kidnappings, possession of stolen property. Some of these, if you look back, it's in 2020, we see a jump back to a more historical number that we need to keep in mind. You know, that's not good. And I suspect some of this may be what other places have seen is an increase in pandemic related numbers, because I know you read about similar kind of increases across the nation in some places, these numbers. So of course it's a concern, but just to give you some comparison of data in terms of your analysis here.
Yeah, no, I think the pandemic is a critical question, whether that's driving some of this. It could also be discovery reform on the arrests, right?
Only.
And I'm sorry, Matt has a court appointment.
Yeah,
I he'll be here soon.
I think they've chosen with some minor larceny cases, which I would approve of for policy reasons for first-time offenders, some alternatives of how they deal with those. But if you look at the numbers on those, you saw that back. If you look at like the 18 and 19 numbers and so forth, that may be one explanation of why there's somewhat of a reduction in arrests.
It might be a factor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And I mean, there could be a number of factors there too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Shauna, what do you think?
Well, I was actually wondering if you can send out the information provided by the Sheriff's Department. I didn't receive that.
Oh, Jen, could you send that out, please? Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah. And just to summarize that, we're seeing some fluctuation from the sheriff's side, but not nearly as much change as we're seeing in the city. So it's interesting. At any rate, Martha?
Yeah, to piggyback on Sean's, I didn't get your sending the city's data or Jen's report. On something like this, especially when we're kind of all in the middle of this, it'd be great if it could just go to those things could go to all legislators.
Certainly. I don't want to inundate people, but I think that should probably be an outcome. I'd like us to have this discussion. And frankly, not to telegraph my punches here, but at the end of the day, I'd like it to start informing us on how we want to try to track this and collect better data, because this is going to be something we're going to be able to do if we pass the resolution regarding the CJC in just a few minutes. But yeah, I think all the legislators should see this information, particularly because we've bet on ATIs. And the whole success of the ATI program is premised on the idea that you're not driving up your crime rate. And I think we have to be pretty jealous about that we're not seeing an increase of crime because of our aggressive approach to ATIs.
Thank you, Rich.
Derek, did you have a comment?
No, not so much, Rich, but I agree with you. I don't think our crime in the county is skyrocketing or anything of that nature. I'm not overly familiar with how IPD got their numbers or where they so much came from, but we're not seeing it definitely so drastically in the county. And like you mentioned, I think a lot of it is stemming from COVID, at least the certain areas that we do see an increase, and as well as maybe perhaps lower arrest numbers. You know, the deputies have been out there a lot less interactions due to COVID. So I think that may be causing some of it as well. And plus our quite honestly, our deputy numbers have been down. I mean, we've had quite a few retirements. We went through COVID with a short hiring freeze. And so I think less people, maybe you're going to get less proactivity, but I didn't see anything in there that necessarily jumped out to me as being a major concern.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to speculate, but certainly on the city side, you can see some reduction in headcount there that may be contributing somewhat. You know, another factor that's possible is bail reform, but it doesn't seem like bail reform hit very hard here, that we didn't see a lot of people not in jail that wouldn't otherwise not be in jail, if I can use a double negative. But looking for reasons why the city's numbers have changed so much, you know, I think you have to think about that one too. I would imagine it would be a bigger factor in other parts of the state. But anybody else? Right. Well, I'm glad you got a chance to look at this. Martha, I will make sure this is shared to all the legislators. I think we do need to do a lot more work to figure out what does this really mean and what's causing it. But it's something I think we have to pay attention to. And again, you know, one of the really good things I think we've done in bringing police reform forward is the data analysis. We're going to be data collection and analysis we're going to be able to do. Oh, I see Jen has just sent out information to everybody if you look in the chat. Right. With everybody's permission, when Matt gets here, I might ask him a couple questions about this because I'd like to get his input. Why don't we proceed on? And I believe the next item is county administration. And I see that.
Rich, I just have one question.
Yeah.
For Under Sheriff Olin in regards to the report. I'm looking at it now, and whenever it has the section, I notice that like it will have a number there and then it will have all the charges underneath. Does that mean all of the charges per that person?
Are you talking about the column for IBR coding?
I'm talking about the column that says section, and then I'm just wondering if each one of these numbers is an identity of a person.
I don't see a column that's titled section. There's one that says IBR coding. Are you seeing like 09A?
No, like 125.25.
Were you looking at?
Oh, you're looking at the penal law to IBR coding.
Yeah.
I included that because if you look at I think you might have to hit the 3 dots to see the actual
Okay.
chart. The chart that we provided, there's a column called IBR coding. You'll see like 09A, 13.
Okay.
And then it gives a title of that IBR coding. I included the penal law to IBR coding so you know what penal law charges apply to that IBR code.
Okay.
For example, like 13B is simple assault. Well, simple assault actually incorporates maybe, I don't know, 15 to 20 different penal law violations so that it could potentially be. And I thought that might be beneficial for you guys to see what penal law crimes are associated with which IBR code.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for clarifying.
And is it fair to say, Jen, that there's some, you have to be careful reading it into it when you see assault, simple assault, that can be a whole range of behaviors, like a really bad thing versus something that is not good, but isn't, you know, and for purposes of putting it into a code so you can get enough data to look at simple assault, you're trying to combine a lot of different behaviors. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's why I felt it was important to incorporate the penal law to IBR coding, because I mean, you could see, robbery or aggravated assault, and it incorporates 20 to 30 different penal law charges potentially that would have fallen into that category. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you. Dan, did you have a comment? I see your comment in the chat. Did you want to say something about incidents?
Well, I think we need to be aware that, a lot of the violent incidents that happen in the city of Ithaca and in the county aren't reflected in arrest numbers because there's never an arrest. So I did a quick search a while back just of shots fired incidences, because it started because one of our people was alleged to have been a suspect, and I was shocked by the number. I just Googled shots fired Ithaca and 2 pages came up. So I just documented those. I would say 25% or less, there's been an arrest, but there's been at least 25 occasions where somebody's discharged a firearm within the city of Ithaca since March of 2019. So that's an average of, roughly 1 a month, which I don't recall earlier in my time here in Ithaca. I've been here 20 years. I don't recall that level of frequency of firearms discharges.
Yeah, it does seem like there have been more incidents, but you hate to proceed by anecdote. But I think you're right. And of course, they will feed into the incident reports, but not the arrests, unless you find the person doing it. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you. Let's keep going. Next up is County Administration. Jason, welcome.
Good
Oh,
afternoon.
actually, before you go, I see Matt has just joined us. Matt, I hate to get you cold here, but we've just been having a conversation about the city report for 2020 on crime statistics, and the reports there of various potentially violent crimes going up and arrests going down. And we were trying to figure out what might be leading to those statistics. And I wanted to give you a chance to comment if you had any thoughts.
Thanks, Rich. I think Dan is right. A lot of the violent incidents, the shots fired, result in people not cooperating with the police, not naming names, or people having left the scene before the police arrive, and no witnesses wanting to talk to the police. So, I mean, that is a significant percentage of those shots fired and other violent incidences that happened in the city of Ithaca. So I think that's definitely true. I agree with that 100%.
Lance was commenting on whether discovery reform might be a factor or bail reform.
No, I don't think so. Not with violent crimes. Those are crimes that we would never triage out. We certainly have triaged out Walmart petty larcenies that somebody's stealing a $1 lipstick. We don't want to prosecute those individuals, but those have been triaged out, but never at the expense. We would never not prosecute a violent crime if we were able to.
Okay. Do you think some of the reduction overall in arrests is related to discovery reform, putting aside the high level crimes?
I think it's hard to say that for sure because of COVID. I know COVID was a significant factor in lower arrest numbers. People just weren't out and around for a long time. So I would hesitate to attribute it to any one factor. It could be, but I can't say that for sure. There's certainly more work involved with any arrest because of all the additional discovery materials that we have to collect and that the law enforcement officers have to provide to us. But that I don't think has decrease the number of arrests.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Anybody? Okay, Jason, sorry about that. You're up. Welcome.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good afternoon. So we have on the agenda today a resolution, and I believe Deanna circulated a memo to the Public Safety Committee. This is the resolution that was proposed several weeks ago regarding the establishment and funding of a community justice center. In short, this effort is, we want to move this forward, and we've outlined in the memo some of the next steps to develop the parameters around the Community Justice Center. We met, Rich, with you, Leslyn, Henry, myself, Deanna, Dominic, to discuss, what were some of the elements that needed to go into it. And we outlined that in the, I'm pulling up the memo right now just to read off it. We outlined that in the memo about what are the next steps over the course of probably the next month, coming back to public safety by the end of May, and identifying anywhere from the structure of the Community Justice Center to an advisory committee. What are the parameters that would go around that? What would be their role? The positions, duty position statements or job descriptions, and how they would assist in moving forward some of the initiatives. And actually part of that process would also be outlining prioritization of initiatives and what recommendations might be approached for second and third. So it's really trying to map out the relationship of the Community Justice Center with the county and the city, and its purpose, its scope, or charter, so to speak. We would want to do that in partnership with our departments, as well as with the city. And we talked to the mayor briefly about ensuring that there were a few common council members along with our legislators involved in some of these discussions, so that there's open communication involving Sheriff's Office, IPD, so that there's open and transparent communication about the establishment of the Community Justice Center. We identified some of the budget and some of the details around that. From ease of execution, we would encompass them as county employees with a contract with the city to provide service to fulfill the charter of the Community Justice Center. We would bill them. So this is not it's not an unknown relationship where we contract with each other for services. We've talked about housing the team in the mental health building so that they're free and clear of being able to communicate with different partners, different entities. And then providing them with some computers and some support needs that they have to get up and running. One thing that we also included is a project management software, and this is something Dominic has done a great job trying to identify. And while we're proposing it be a county cost, because we think we can use this across a spectrum of projects in the organization, not just related to the public safety reform. So it's a cost that we would incur. And it would be essentially an open, I don't say open data, but a transparent dashboard that would be able to provide updates on a real-time basis to the public that can monitor how we're moving through with some of the recommendations and implementing some of the recommendations. So all in all, the resolution that I think you prepared, Rich, they have in front of them, it's paying our portion or half of it. And other than the additional cost related to the software.
Okay,
that's the summary of it. I'd ask Deanna or Dom if they want anything to add to that, or Lisa.
I just like to state, I'm getting ready to forward this on because of my understanding it went to the Public Safety Committee, and to Martha's point, some other folks, I'm happy to share that. The whole point is to move this resolution forward. However, it's to develop a plan as well. And so the consensus around the memo is that we need to connect with the Sheriff's Office. We need to connect with the IPD. We have to connect with Common Council around the concepts to move forward. And so I just want to make sure that was clear and said out loud. And I'm getting ready to email Derek and Jen right now. Derek, you talking to me? Or I think Derek may be on the...
Yeah.
I saw his mouth moving, so I wasn't sure if he was trying to speak. Okay.
Yeah. It may be semantics, but there certainly will be further planning. But for purposes of our vote today, you are presenting a preliminary plan. And to clarify and put it on the record, you're contemplating 2 headcount that will be county employees and will be contracted out to serve the city. One of those would be in a management position and perhaps titled director, but you're still working on the job descriptions. The other would be a data analyst. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Shauna.
Yeah, I was just wondering, as far as this office and this center is concerned, how much foot traffic are you expecting? Because I don't want the fact that there's such a stigma towards mental health. I wouldn't want people to not feel comfortable going to the mental health building, and for it to be placed in our mental health building and us to categorize it as something with a mental health notion, I guess. I mean, I don't want it to have a negative feel to it going out the gate because it's associated with the mental health building, since we have such a stigma in our community.
That's a good point. I don't know that I have a great answer in terms of foot traffic, Shauna, but it's a point worth noting. I think when we go through these discussions, I would envision more meetings being held in neutral locations. Foot traffic, that's hard to gauge, but I think let's note that as we go through these conversations over the next month. I mean, we have some other spaces available that we thought this was a good neutral space, but your point's well taken. I don't think we have really had that discussion yet.
I mean, it would be great if it could be like at the Human Services Annex, or even like an office like the Office of Human Rights. That way it could have its own autonomy and people would feel comfortable going in and out of the building.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
All right. Deborah?
Thank you. I had a question from a constituent as to whether or not this CGC was going to be a permanent part of our county government or a temporary ad hoc addition until we get this Reimagining Public Safety initiative up and running. Could you clarify, please?
Sure. This proposal is for 2 years and then reevaluate. So it is not suggesting it's being permanent right now. I think it's to understand what happens over the next 2 years. So this would be an annual cost, but I think in our memo, we talk about having it be a 2-year expectation. So similar to a 2-year OTR. And then evaluate success, evaluate opportunities from there and see where we are with the status of recommendations and so on and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay. Martha?
Thanks very much. As far as stigma, that's interesting because we're kind of trying to combat that. The whole idea here is the alternative response to an armed officer would be somebody who is trained in mental health issues, et cetera, and how to respond. But I like the idea of a sort of more of a storefront, if that's where, like, is the back of the Human Services Annex, I've lost track. Is it used for?
It's used by Matt for grand jury right now, right, Matt? Yes.
Okay.
So, I think that's we'll have to take that into consideration. I don't know whether that changes or not changes. We can talk to Matt as what the expectations are with that.
We can't use the courthouse anymore because of distancing.
Okay.
That annex, we've been using it on Thursdays for grand jury. I was just there an hour ago.
So I think we would need to figure out what the space would be used for, because as I understand the staff of CJC would be involved with all these different work groups that would work on each recommendation. So I presume, and I don't know if we're going to be meeting remotely for 2 years or if we're going to need physical meeting space. But that might be something you'd really want to, figure into the calculation.
Yes.
Okay. Mike?
Well, I was just wondering, can you hear me? Yeah. All
Yes.
right. It's my understanding this is going to kind of be modeled after the COVID-19 response. I mean, the health department and our director there was one of the major players in that. I'm kind of wondering, since we're modeling it after that, how the sheriff, I'm of the mind that this should be run through the sheriff, but that's clearly not the mind of the administration. How do you foresee the sheriff being involved, I guess, in this process?
all of our departments are involved, whether it's the district attorney's office, probation, assigned counsel, sheriff's office. I mean, I think they participate in the work groups relevant to those recommendations. So I think that's how we would approach that.
But it's really a reimagining of policing, not a reimagining of district attorney's office.
No, but I think the district attorney would, and I'm sure Matt would agree, should have some involvement in communication, because all of these, a lot of these initiatives are going to involve the district attorney's interaction. They're going to involve assigned counsel's interaction, probation's interaction. They'll probably involve DSS's interaction. Frankly, probably most of your human services at some point in time will be called to participate as we start to map out what these recommendations look like.
Yeah, Matt, do you have a comment?
I do. I mean, a lot of what we're trying to accomplish with this new world we're going to live in is more transparency, more trust in our public safety system. And to that extent, I've been spending a lot of time on the JEDI group. I'm on the data analysis group, and we've been talking about the public safety dashboard and what statistics to be able to provide, what data we can provide on a regular basis to the community. And I think that all meshes in with this community justice center. So, I mean, there's a recommendation that the DA's office provide data and assigned counsel provide data, and how we do that and whether it's meaningful data really requires us to be part of that process.
Yeah, I would certainly hope that all the affected departments are well involved in the planning of the CJC and the other elements of reimagining going forward. I think that's the contemplated pathway. Jason, I assume that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't know how they can't.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments before we proceed? Daniel.
I just have one concern about the name, because the formal name of the probation department is the Department of Probation and Community Justice. So I think that may create some confusion with folks. So maybe the County Justice Department or County Department of Justice, or we can drop the community part off of our name or something. But it needs to be clear where people need to go.
Dan, I think we should put you on the naming committee. I agree. We can have some discussion about that as well.
Thank you, Jason.
It's a good point.
I was flashing back to the Tompkins Center for History and Culture.
Oh my gosh.
Oh no. Okay. Well, if we can get to the more ministerial part of this process, could I get a motion to take the resolution that we were considering at our last public safety meeting off the table? Shauna moves. Glenn seconds. All right. Can I get a vote on that? Glenn?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. Then I would ask for a motion to substitute the updated resolution that's contained on page 22 of the agenda. Could I get that motion? Shauna moves. Glenn seconds. Thank you. All right. Do we want discussion? Anybody have questions about the changes made? And what we were trying to do is to reflect what had happened in our discussion at the March meeting, that we wanted more detail about the plan. And I think we have that, with the understanding that there's more planning to do. This money will go into the contingent fund. So it's going to sit there. It certainly won't be drawn on until we have a fully fleshed out plan, and we could go back and undo it if we're unhappy before a dime is spent, I suspect.
Yes.
So, yeah. Martha.
Thank you very much. Appreciate, if there's any committee member that wants to speak first,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Dan, I appreciate that. I knew CJC sounded familiar. I'm like, where have I heard that? Well, that's the day reporting center is called Community Justice Center, right? Anyway,
When it was at the old library, that building was called the Community Justice Center.
okay. Thanks. My concern is I'm looking at basically the last resolved. It says the legislature shall receive a report from the administrator about the establishment of the center and requirements. I don't see anything between here and there. I don't see any description of how, who's involved in creating this, whether, that, and we had talked earlier about sort of making sure that this isn't brought to us as kind of a fait accompli, that the legislature is involved, that council's involved, that community members are involved in setting, in kind of defining what this is.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure whether that goes in the resolution or what.
I think that's
That
what
was
we
sort
had.
of the point of the last resolved, was to say there's going to be a further presentation and more detail fleshed out before money's actually spent.
Yeah, I think our expectation is to come back at the end of May with some movement and some more descriptions about how this operation will work. So we have our work cut out with us over the next few weeks to get some parties together and talk about ins and outs of things.
And who's involved in that process?
I think everyone we talked about, should be involved to provide some level of input. I know we'll work with Rich and Henry and Leslin as well, as we have. From a legislature side, we've talked to the mayor to ensure that he has a few common council members involved, so there's transparent communication with the common council.
Okay, so sort of before and that's leading up to a job description and all the rest of it. That's right. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I would just add, Martha, that we feel some pressure to move this along, that we really want to send a message to the community that we passed the reimagining resolution and we want to advance it. So that's part of the reason for doing this in tandem. Glenn.
Thanks, Rich. This resolution just established the CJC, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
we're not doing anything, because I've read someplace that I can't find it, of course, that they will report bi-monthly back to the city council and the legislatures. But what role does the public safety committee have?
I think it's the same. It's a regular update to them as well, Glenn. I think that from a transparency perspective, you want the CJC to report to your legislative bodies. And I don't think that excludes the public safety committee as well.
All right, so this isn't written down yet, right?
It's in the memo. That I think that's where you read it, Glenn. In the memo is where this would be reporting to the legislature and the common council on a regular basis. So I think that's where you're referencing where you read it. I don't see why we would not want to update the public safety committee periodically as well.
And who chooses the advisory board?
I think that's to be determined, but I would probably push on the legislature and the common council. I think those are some structures we have to figure out.
Okay, thank you.
And I think you want to ensure you have community representation. So I think that's probably one of the, to be honest with you, probably one of the more challenging discussions as to that oversight or that group and who's going to make that up and what their role is.
And Glenn, I would just add from our meeting that we had last Monday that it's likely that some of the other county committees would get reports as well, because the scope of this is pretty broad.
Right.
So, yeah. Shauna.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up the community input, because I think that is really the whole basis of this executive order and the conversation that we're having. I just wanted to make sure that whenever we are hiring for these positions, that we will be asking for a community voice to be part of the interviews.
Yes.
Okay.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Rich, this is Michelle.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know that this resolution is scheduled to go to budget on May 10th and the full legislature on May 18th.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Deborah, we'll make sure the entire memo is sent out to the legislature. Sorry.
All right, anybody else? Questions, comments? Are we ready to vote? All right. Shauna,
Yes.
Glenn,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So that's unanimous. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. This is an important step forward, among many steps we will be taking, but good news. And that'll go to budget and then to the legislature. So hopefully it'll continue on. Jason, anything else to report from county administration?
Not right now. We all had our second shot yesterday afternoon, so we're all dragging a little bit. So if you noticed, we're all tired. We're good. Gonna go out, run a few miles, and we'll come back, have dinner. No,
Okay.
I think we're okay. I don't have anything new to report. Sent out our weekly updates to you this afternoon. So
Okay, well, congratulations on your shots. Sheriff's Office.
Deanna, do you have something yet?
Oh, I just, is it okay, Rich, if it's okay if I speak?
Yeah, no, jump in, please.
I just was wanting to say, yes, we all had our shots, and I didn't know I could feel this way, but I'm glad to be here. I was going to say that I hope this is a chance for us all to reset. I know there's been a lot of things said, in the paper. We are one organization. And so I respect every colleague that's on this screen, and all the hard work that predates my being here at Tompkins County. And so I just feel like that's worth saying, and that we're all part of the same team, and what that looks like. And again, the memo does not spell out any details. What it tells us to do is to make sure we're engaged with all the folks on the screen. Is really the purpose of the memo, is to say, how do you move forward? And also giving notice to our colleagues at the city as well, with the same expectation of saying, how do we bring IPD to the table? So all of the discussions should be had in advance. And so, and then it's been a fairly quick turnaround since our meeting on Monday. Just adding to, if you look at the memo, everything that's in page 1, you've already seen. It was just the budget information, and just spelling out some of the details. And so again, in terms of 100% transparency, I just think it's important to level set in terms of equity around this table with folks who are most involved, and then also those folks in the community. So that was my 2 cents, and hopefully that made sense post-COVID shot number 2.
Thank you, Deanna, and thanks for all your work on this. It's been very helpful. So, okay. Anything else? I think we're up to you, Sheriff. Welcome.
Thanks, Rich. If you allow me to, I'll be extremely quick because we may all be done with meetings for a little while. I know I'm tired of them. We've had a lot and a lot of long ones lately, but I don't have a lot to add outside of a report. I'll just update you on our inmate population quick. We are still having issues with the state and taking our state readies. We got 14 now, so the number keeps growing, but we're hoping that's going to be resolved quickly. And that basically stems from COVID. Once again, we had an inmate come in with COVID, so the state wouldn't take any of the inmates because of that. So I honestly think they like to make excuses not to take them, but that's where we're at, and hopefully we'll have that resolved soon, and we should see our numbers start declining again, thankfully. So other than that, I'll leave it at that unless anybody has questions.
If you could indulge me, I was wondering if you could read into the record for those who might be watching our meeting, the letter that you received from your companion police department on page 39. I thought that was a great example of how the sheriff's office works with other police agencies.
Yeah, I apologize, Rich. I don't have it in front of me. That's on me. So I can't do that. I'm sorry.
Jan, do you have it?
Yeah. Yep, I have it. I might have to squint a little bit. It's a little small on my computer screen.
Please squint.
Yes.
Because I think it's a really important message about what the deputies are out there doing on a very regular basis.
This is Sheriff Osborne. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize and thank several members of your office that assisted my department with a critical incident on the evening of March 17th, 2021, located at 315 Barrows Street in the village of Groton. On the aforesaid date, I was called in for a stabbing incident with where a female was stabbed in the left upper leg. When I arrived on the scene, I was met outside the residence by Sergeant Mark Ninabaji, and he briefed me on the events that had happened and the action they had taken. He also stated that the Sheriff's Department would assist in any way I needed. I learned that the female became unconscious due to the amount of blood loss she was sustaining, and that Deputy Kyle Davenport assisted with applying a tourniquet on the victim's leg. The victim was flown by LifeNet helicopter to Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse, New York. This swift action by Deputy Davenport most likely saved her life. I also learned that as members of your departments arrived on scene, they took quick necessary action in assisting my officer and officers of the New York State Police with dealing with the suspect and other family members of the suspect/victim. Sergeant Joseph Manning, Sergeant Mark Ninavaji, Deputy Stephen Savical, and Deputy Cody Street assisted with trying to locate evidence and assisted with crime scene security. Deputy Davenport took depositions from witnesses, and Deputy Savical offered to take a deposition from the victim, from which she had to travel to Syracuse to do. I can't thank your department enough for the work they put in that evening. You are lucky and should be extremely proud to have such a group of officers that are very professional and work well together. Those officers stepped up to assist another agency without hesitation. My officer admitted to being a little overwhelmed at the start of the incident, but was very relieved when your officer showed up to assist. Again, I would like to recognize each and every one of your officers for their assistance and profound professionalism with this incident on March 17, 2021. Sincerely, Lieutenant Officer in Charge Troy Boyce, the Village of Groton Police Department.
Thank you. As I said, I just think that that is a great example of how the police agencies in the county cooperate and how important it is that we have the sheriff's department as a coordinating agency. I don't know, Sheriff, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, Rich, I'm really proud of the people that work for me at the sheriff's office. I mean, as everybody can imagine, the last year with COVID and then police reform, it's been very tough on all of them. A lot of them have taken it very personally. But you know what? You probably also noticed they're not out there publicly complaining either. And the job's not the same as it was when I started many years ago, working the road and stuff. And I give them a lot of credit. I mean, they just do a fantastic job. And, they've really followed our leadership over the last 2 years and really seen the department go in a different direction. And, they've been right there with us. And, I just can't thank them enough. So thanks for letting us read that in.
Yeah. Oh, thank you guys. Okay. Next up, District Attorney Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Rich. We are starting jury trials again. We have one starting on Monday. So hopefully that will help with the jail population as well. There are quite a few, as we've been talking about the last few months, individuals who are waiting for their jury trials and which have been scheduled in the next few months. So that's probably the biggest development for us.
Yeah, that's really good news. Certainly for your department, but also for the people who've been waiting for trials to get them to the court.
Yes.
I assume that the logistics are going to be pretty difficult from a COVID standpoint.
This first trial, I think, is going to be a short trial in terms of the evidence and witnesses presented, but jury selection is probably going to be the longest part of it. Because normally we would have 100 people in the main courtroom and they would be called up in groups of 18 to question, and everybody else in the courtroom could hear the questioning and have the benefit of knowing what the topics were ahead of time. We're not going to be able to do that with jury selection in COVID, with COVID precautions in place. So it'll be a much more methodical, slow process of picking a jury.
Okay. Any questions for our district attorney? Okay, well, thank you, Matt. Next up, Department of Emergency Response.
Hello, Brian's on vacation, so you get stuck with me today.
Welcome.
I don't really have a whole lot to report. I mean, we're continuing to engage in planning for a backup 911 center with Cornell University. I hope to have a more in-depth and robust report for you next month. We're still kind of in a holding pattern, waiting on a definite location. Some things to note in our TomStat report. You all have asked in the past about domestic disturbance. Those are once again up for both February and March. And one other one of note is a significant drop in officer-initiated calls, be it traffic stops or whatever it may be. And in relation to the shots fired that you guys were talking about earlier, both for February and March this year, there's actually a significant decrease over the 5-year average for last month and for this month.
I guess good news.
4 in February, 4 in March, I should say.
And Jessica, I'm sorry, I should have involved you in the discussion we had earlier. I'd like to ask the classification that you're using for the Tomstat report. Does that follow the IBR codes?
I have no idea what IBR codes are.
Okay.
These are in direct relation to the nature codes that are in the CAD system. So if those correlate to IBR, then yes.
Okay, lots of acronyms. I think we need to do some work offline to determine the correlation between those two. Yeah. Unless Jen has an answer. Okay. All right. Any questions or comments for Jessica? Okay, well, thank you. And next up is Department of Probation and Community Justice. And I see Dan.
Thank you. Carla's with us too. I'd like to start by thanking Carla for undertaking an awful lot as deputy. She's been doing a wonderful job. Since we're currently in 2 different cohorts, she's managing half the department and I'm managing half the department on any given day. So I wanted to thank her for that. She's really been a great partner. As far as our things going on in the department, Matt, Lance, and I have set up a meeting with the judges of record for the courts of record in Tompkins County for next Wednesday to discuss marijuana reform and how that, to come up with a unified approach on how we're going to handle that as it goes through probation cases, as it applies to probation cases, both the ones that are existing and moving forward. I went to the Council of Probation Administrators meeting last week, and we haven't gotten a lot of guidance from the state yet for how to handle those. A lot of them are waiting for case law to be established. So we want to be ahead of that curve and make sure that we're following the law and also giving a united the messaging is united to the people, whether they be convicted or pre-conviction, of how we're going to handle marijuana post legalization. If anyone would like to join that meeting, any of you, I'm sure you'd be welcome. So it's 10:30 on Wednesday. Just let me know. I could send you a Zoom invite.
Yes, please.
Just to clarify, we're not talking about the prosecution of marijuana offenses. We're talking about the supervision of people who are on probation already or in the judicial system who are maybe using marijuana. Is that a fair statement, Dan?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. That's going to be a very interesting discussion. Yeah. Martha.
Yeah, I've been thinking, what does the county need to know or do? And maybe this is the place for it. With the new law, it'd be great to know what our responsibilities and opportunities are. I don't know. I know haven't looked into it in any kind of detail, but there's something about opting out. I don't know if that's just for towns, I think. What happens with expunging of records? Is that something that this committee will talk about?
I think somewhat we'll get into that. We're going to need to touch upon all of those issues. As far as the opting in and out, that's outside of my purview. I really think that's a county legislative decision. I know if you opt out, you don't get any funding. So,
Martha, I can say that if any municipality wants to opt out of the marijuana laws, I'm still not going to prosecute them. I'm not going to prosecute the charges. So And in terms of expungement, there are very, very few people in the last 10 years, I think, who have been convicted of marijuana offenses, but I'd be happy to expunge them quickly.
And as far as violations of probation go, I can't recall the last time we filed a violation of probation against anyone with the sole allegation that they were using marijuana. It's usually, if that's included, it's attached to a host of other behaviors that we're more concerned about. So,
Okay. All right, thank you.
thank
Dan,
you.
Do you think you'd be in a position to provide a report to this committee next month, or do you think later?
I can report out on what we discuss next week and anything that I learn between now and then. It is a fairly robust piece of legislation, so there's a lot to read and digest.
Okay.
I don't feel like I have my head wrapped entirely around it at this time.
All right. Well, I'd be happy to give you some time next month, and if you need more, if you want to delay it, that's it.
Okay.
I think it would be important for the committee to hear where we're going on all this.
Okay.
Shauna.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I guess I just had a question in regards to the logistics, because part of the legislation talks about those that have been victims of the war on drugs and actually having them be part of the solution whenever it comes to cultivation and distribution of marijuana. And so what does this look like for someone who might have had a past record that has to deal with either possession or some other criminal record in the future, if they were to be part of cultivating or being part of working at a dispensary? Like, is there, I guess my question is, like, what does this look like moving forward?
Looks
I'm
like
not sure how they are going to handle it as far as ex-offenders. I know there will be a licensing process similar to, say, a liquor license. I don't know what the eligibility requirements will be for that. My focus really is how it impacts probationers and, you know, both the people that we have on, whether they need things expunged from their records, and how we handle it moving forward as far as whether or not people are allowed to use marijuana based upon, you know, their charges, the behavior that led to them being arrested, those types of things.
I mean, I think my concern is, like, they're just talking out of both sides of their mouth, though, in that they want to involve people that have recently been incarcerated, which means they still could, in fact, be on probation as part of the process. However, that might not be within what they're able to do under probation. Is that right, Dan?
We're going to have conversations about all that because
Okay.
it really hasn't been discussed.
Okay.
We do, we don't always, but we're willing to, on a case-by-case basis, to let people with alcohol problems in their past, you know, work in a restaurant or a bar.
Okay.
So I'm thinking a lot of the correlations are going to be handled similarly to the way we handle alcohol.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And if we could have a further discussion, set aside some time at a future meeting, I think that'd be really helpful. And Jen, if you were able to get any information on any advances in terms of being able to test for under the influence of marijuana, because I anticipate we're going to see an uptick in driving while under the influence. And we should see what our options there are for addressing that. But Lance, did you have something?
I can wait until you get to my department, and then I can follow up. I don't want to step on Dan's time.
I mean, I could give you a brief update on that right now, if you wanted it right now.
Yes, please. Yes.
And I'm just speaking as my experience and currently still as a DRE, what's been the conversation around the state has been regarding this. And they've been working on it actually for a couple of years now down in New York City. I think the future will see saliva testing, specifically for marijuana offenses, DWAI drugs. Saliva is a better way to tell more immediate use of cannabis than is blood. As we know, cannabis can stay in your blood depending on frequency of use for a long period of time, where saliva they're working on shows more of a immediate use, something in the near future. So I could see advances in that. Saliva testing is talked about in the penal law and the CPL. So I mean, that's already established. I don't think there's going to have to be much change to the law there, just the technology itself. And then they're just trying to get more people ARIDE and DRE certified across the state. But, it's a long, strenuous class. So, they're trying as best as they can, but there are a limited number of DREs within the state. And just one comment on marijuana legalization, something that I noticed was missing from this bill. And again, this just comes from my experience as a DRE, is there is no discussion about concentrated cannabis anywhere in this bill that I could see. And from my experience, it seems that the majority of users currently are using concentrated cannabis, whether it be in vape pens or dabbing. But I didn't see that addressed anywhere in the bill, but maybe I missed it. Matt, I don't know if did you see that?
Yeah, it's there. It's there. Some of the quantities that you're allowed to possess legally do refer to the concentrated cannabis as well as the ordinary form of it.
If you don't mind sending a summary maybe of what you found, because I only found leafy bud amounts that they're legally allowed to possess.
I can send you, I have a summary that I got, I can send you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Ann?
Thank you. I've heard a few times in various meetings that people are expecting marijuana use to go up. And as far as, I'm not an expert, but as far as the little bit of research I've done, that it hasn't gone up appreciably in states such as Colorado. So I just want us to think about that as we say that, to not to expect that, because that might not be the case.
Okay. All right, Jason?
Just to add another twist into things, if this wasn't complicated enough, we have a drug-free policy in the county. So we just had a very interesting conversation yesterday about this topic. As you probably know, there's a variety of different issues that come into play, from folks with CDL licenses to folks that work under federal regulations to folks that work under different circumstances, peace officers. So I have no answers for you other than, there's going to be more confusion on this issue over the course of the next several months when we try to figure out what we do for our own policy internally for our employees.
Okay. Yeah. More to come. All right. Anything else on that? All right, moving on. We're up to Lance, the assigned counsel program. Welcome.
Thank you. Let me just clear up a couple questions on marijuana. There are, Sean had asked, there are expungement provisions, automatic. The chief judge in the state has to automatically expunge most things. There's also a way people can go into court and seek expungement. Matt's correct. It's probably not going to be a major deal for us here. There are some historical convictions people could address. Going to be a big deal in other parts of the state. And then in terms of participation, your questions asked, in most cases, I mean, people on probation may have a different situation, someone on active probation, but historically, in terms of licensing, being able to engage in production and all that, when they move forward, the law states that it allows most people, they exclude people if you have a felony conviction for selling to minors, those types of things, where you've been engaged in activities involving minors, and that they're excluded. Most other people, it seems, will be allowed to. I mean, they've sought to address that. A lot of that's going to get worked out. I mean, it is, as Dan said, it's an immensely dense bill because they dealt with the commercial side and the penal law side. They dealt with family court, DSS is impacted. So there's some huge impacts. there's a bunch of penal law changes. For instance, it's interesting. They've essentially codified what's in a couple of prior Tompkins County Court decisions on odor of marijuana doesn't provide reasonable suspicion of a crime now. They've limited the search. You stop a driver for DWAI, you smell marijuana, they're limited in their search abilities. There's some things there they've addressed. That'll give my attorneys and Matt's attorneys things to argue about for a few years. So it's fun for that. But just to follow up to try to answer a couple of your questions.
Thank you.
On that, and I'll send you, Jen. I have some summaries I've been trying to prepare for our meeting next. I'll shoot those for you as well. Because Matt's right there is some stuff about concentrated cannabis, but it's really buried. You have to really search to find it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. They never make it easy to read those things.
No, they don't. Okay. Well,
But that's it for me.
Actually, you have a resolution?
Just briefly, what that is we developed an online application for the public. We have a paper application we've used for years. This is designed to improve our service, particularly during COVID, to the community. Makes it easier for people to apply to get, to apply for an attorney. It's all grant funded by the state. And that's what the resolution is. It's reflecting, that's why you see that transfer, coming in. And it reflects, it's actually, as I recall, done on Laserfish. It was to pay them to develop the online application and put it in place. And you see it's our budget, their resolution is just the transfer, take our state grant money to pay for it.
So the resolution allows the state to rain money on us.
Yeah.
Okay. Could I get a motion to take the money? Glenn moves. Dave seconds. Any questions or comments? And I see Henry has joined us.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Glenn,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Shauna,
Yes.
Henry,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So that's unanimous. Is there anything else, Lance, you have for us?
Nope, that's it from me.
All right. Any other business to come before the committee? Seeing none, we've finished in a pretty good time today. This is good. And thank you for all your work. And I'm very happy that we passed the CJC resolution. There'll certainly be more to come there, but good work. So talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye.